I don't care what you guys say, colored people shouldn't be saying the N word. And before you guys hit me with, oh, but we're part black, you're still not a black person though. I don't feel comfortable with colored people saying the N word because you don't identify as black. You know you're not racially black, and just because you have black in you doesn't make you black racially, okay? Why isn't this focusing on me? Whatever. Colored people shouldn't be saying the N word.
Never have I thought I'll see the day where South Africans are fighting about who can say the N-word and who can't. And since I'm colored in the eyes of the South African government, I thought I might just add my 2 cents here. Since this is an American term, an American slur, let's identify who they allow to say the word. How about we start with one of the most famous biracial men in the world, Drake. Father, black American, mother, white Canadian. Drake himself born in Canada. And Americans allow him to say the word. And since we're talking about Drake, how about we just talk about J. Cole as well? J. Cole's father, black American, J. Cole's mother, white American. However, check this out. J. Cole was actually born in Germany, and he's allowed to say it. Now, according to America's own history, there was a time where they preferred to be called colored. And then during the late 1960s to 1970s, they shifted to black. Now, as we learned with the Tyler situation last year, they still consider colored a slur. So if black South Africans are telling colored South Africans that we can't use the N-word because it's a slur towards black people, even though the slur is technically towards black American people. And then on top of that, colored people can't call themselves colored people in America because it's a slur over there. Can you see the problem that it's causing? I was using Drake and J. Cole as an example, plus the terminologies of how they identified themselves throughout the years, just to prove this point, is that race in America is understood completely different the way South Africans look at it. So let's think about a hypothetical for a moment. What if black Americans never switched over from identifying from colored to black? What if today black Americans were still considered colored? Let's take the slur and the hardship away from the history that that word carries over on that side. And let's just say they were fine with being called colored. Would black South Africans still identify with black American history if they were still called colored? Because at the core of this argument is that we are only separated by the terms we identify with because the apartheid era. I want everybody to remember that the only reason South Africans identify differently is because they forced us. The act forced all South Africans into categories: white, colored, mixed race in brackets, Bantu, black American, or Asian. They forced us. So if not for the apartheid government in 1950 forcing that law on us, maybe, just maybe all of us weren't going to be divided by race. Maybe, just maybe, all of us would have been considered black. Because if Drake has a black father and a white mother, but in the eyes of the Americans can still be considered black and use the N-word, and J. Cole can be born in Germany by a white mother and a black father and can still use the N-word in the eyes of the Americans, then maybe, just maybe, colored people can say the N-word.
And just because you have black in you doesn't make you black racially, okay?
Now, besides the American way of looking at race, I want South Africans to remember that race seen by South Africans is so complex that the most famous mixed-race South African's identity, Trevor Noah, is still being debated by colored people and black people to this day. Now, there was a time period where Trevor Noah was on stage making some jokes where he was considering himself colored.
I was doing a gig in London, and I was sitting with a comic backstage, and we were talking, and he was like, Trevor, you've got a strange accent, Trevor, you've got a strange accent. Tell me, Trevor, tell me, where are you from? And I said, well, Jeremy, I'm from South Africa. He was like, ooh, South Africa? That's amazing, yeah, that's amazing. So what, South Africa, are you Zulu? And I was like, no. Good guess though. I'm not. I'm actually coloured. He was like, oh, don't say that. That's racist, right? That's racist. You don't use that word, coloured, right? You don't use that word out here, Trevor. That's racist, right? Yeah, you don't call people coloured here, right? You don't call yourself that, Trevor. You're free here, brother. You're free. Yeah. You don't use that term, right? You call yourself mixed race, right? Mixed race. That's the PC term worldwide, mixed race.
And then I think I saw a recent podcast, maybe last year, 2 years ago, where he said he was black. Now, I don't know if he was saying that because he was in America and he was speaking to the American audience, or if he was in South Africa speaking to a South African audience. But to this day, colored people still argue that Trevor Noah is colored. And there are some black people that also argue that Trevor Noah is black because he was raised by a black mother in a black household with that culture. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the race argument is so complex that we can't even really identify what Trevor Noah should identify as. Now, obviously, Trevor Noah can identify with whatever he prefers. But because he has a white father and a black mother, there is a very complex argument to be made there. So, I want us to remember that. And because this is an American slur that they identify with, that they have an issue with, that they can parade and use however they feel like, and they can say who can and who can't say it, then maybe black South Africans shouldn't be policing colored South Africans as to who can say it and who can't say it. Because we still don't understand American black culture to its fullest yet. I still would like to ask them, if Drake and J. Cole's father was white, but their mothers were black, would they still be allowed to say the N-word? Because if colored people can't say it, then maybe South Africans as a whole shouldn't be saying it either. But can you see how complicated this thing is? South Africans shouldn't be even identifying with their struggles and their slurs, because according to us, race is completely different towards them, and we saw that with the Tyler situation. Because when I listen to our previous generation, our great-grandfathers and grandmothers, what I hear from them is that there used to be a time where we were identified by our tribe. So we were Khoi, we were San, we were Xhosa, we were Zulu, and with that came our own language. That was the only time we divided ourselves, by our mother tongue and our tribe and our culture. It was the apartheid government that told us, you are black. It was the apartheid government that said, you are colored. It was the apartheid government that said, you are white. And just because they divide us doesn't mean that we need to still divide ourselves today. Let's not say colored people can't do this and black people can't do that. Because in the eyes of the Americans, bringing it back to the argument that we're making today, we are debating about an American slur. In the eyes of the Americans, even if you had a white mother and a black father, or if you had a white father and a black mother, you were considered black. Because if Tyler flew all the way from South Africa to America, and the first thing they identified her as is black, then again, colored people can say the N-word. Why? Because before she opened her mouth and said she was colored, she was considered black. They would have considered her black all the way if she kept her mouth. But I'm proud of her and I'm proud of South Africa by identifying that we see race differently than they do. So, Let's not argue about a slur that doesn't belong to us. It's none of our problems. And I'm sure the only way we say it anyway is because of hip hop. And that's a different argument.